Critics called John Wayne a blowhard for decades, said he made phony war movies and dodged the draft. But not all his war films were propaganda. Some were actually pretty great and still hold up today, and at least one of them is now sitting at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. You don't have to like John Wayne to admit that's a hell of a number. The Green Berets is probably the most notorious war movie John Wayne ever made, and not for good reasons. Wayne didn't just star in it, he co-directed and personally lobbied the Pentagon for support. The Army rewrote parts of the script to match their message, and the result was a heavy-handed, pro-military, anti-communist take on Vietnam, made right in the middle of the war itself. The story puts Wayne as a U.S. Army colonel leading 2 teams of Green Berets in Vietnam. They're trying to hold a base and secretly plot to kidnap an enemy general. Critics hated it. The New York Times even called it unspeakable, stupid, rotten, and false in every detail. Some Vietnam vets found it so unrealistic they laughed out loud in theaters. Still, the controversy drew crowds. The film landed at 23% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it sold a lot of tickets, $32 million off a $7 million budget. Wayne said the bad press actually boosted sales. He didn't care about the backlash. For him, this was about honoring soldiers, not debating policy. Those men don't want to be in Vietnam any more than anyone else, but they do their duty. The Alamo was John Wayne's passion project. He produced, directed, and starred as Davy Crockett. He poured his own money, $1.5 million, into it. He even mortgaged just about everything he owned to get it made. The idea was to tell the story of the 1836 battle, but also to send a message about Cold War America and freedom. Wayne saw it as a movie with a purpose. I hope that seeing the Battle of the Alamo will remind Americans that liberty and freedom don't come cheap. Getting the film made was a grind. Studios were nervous about the $12 million budget, so Wayne had to star in it himself to lock in financing. He originally wanted Clark Gable, but that didn't work out. The scale was massive. Wayne built a huge Alamo set in Texas, hired 7,000 extras, wrangled 1,500 horses and 400 cattle for the final battle. For a first-time director, the pressure was intense. But the result was decent at best. Nothing great about it. Critics thought the film was too long and Wayne was better on screen than behind the camera. Rotten Tomatoes scores it at 55%. It did decent at the box office, about $20 million in North America, but the costs ate up the profits. Wayne lost his own investment and had to sell his share to United Artists to cover the losses. He put everything into an Oscar campaign, got 7 nominations, including Best Picture, and took home only 1 for Best Sound. Most people haven't even heard of this one. Reunion in France isn't a standard John Wayne picture. It's really a Joan Crawford war melodrama with Wayne in a supporting part. Set in Nazi-occupied Paris, Crawford plays a spoiled socialite who gets pulled into the French resistance after meeting Wayne's downed American pilot. MGM tried to market it as a patriotic romance, but the end result didn't work for anyone. The plot is just about as forced as it sounds. Crawford's character suddenly flips from flighty Parisian to underground resistance hero, hiding Wayne from the Gestapo. Most critics panned it as unbelievable and campy. Even Crawford hated it. Years later, she famously said, "If there is an afterlife and I am to be punished for my sins, this is one of the pictures they'll make me see over and over again." She thought she and Wayne both sunk because of the script and their total mismatch as a couple. You'll notice it easily, there's literally zero chemistry. She had another great line about Wayne: "Get John out of the saddle and you've got trouble." That's really the biggest problem here. Wayne's whole screen presence was built on being the tough guy, definitely not the romantic lead sneaking through Paris. MGM wanted to cash in on his rising fame during World War II, but in the end, Wayne's role is mostly just a plot device. This one is a giant, multi-decade saga about one family's journey across America, loaded with every star in Hollywood at the time. Wayne's part is tiny. He plays General Sherman during the Civil War section, which is just a few minutes of screen time. The filmmakers didn't care that Wayne was 28 years older than the real Sherman, they just wanted his presence in the movie. Behind the scenes, director John Ford, a longtime Wayne collaborator, handled the Civil War segment and specifically asked for Wayne as Sherman. Wayne agreed, collected $25,000 for what basically amounted to 3 days of work. The movie itself was a huge success, understandably so. It's a magnificent spectacle and the best use of Cinerama up to that point. The film premiered as a roadshow and stayed in theaters for over 2 years in some places. Box office was massive, over $50 million worldwide, second highest grossing film of 1963. The Oscars loved it too. 3 wins, 5 other nominations, including Best Picture. In 2020, New York Magazine even called it one of the best movies to lose Best Picture. It lost to Lawrence of Arabia. Dark Command is one of Wayne's best early starring roles and probably the best John Wayne and Roy Rogers movie out there, since it's the only one. It's set on the Kansas frontier during the Civil War. Wayne plays a Texan who ends up sheriff, going up against William Cantrell's Raiders. The story's based loosely on the real-life William Quantrill and the Lawrence Massacre. Republic Pictures was usually the B-Western factory, but this time they put real money into the budget. Wayne's name was hot after Stagecoach, so they aimed higher. When it comes to historical accuracy, the movie is a mess. Set in 1860 but loaded with all kinds of historical mistakes. Like there are cult single-action peacemakers that didn't even exist until a decade after the Civil War. None of that really matters for fans. The movie gets the brutality and lawlessness of pre-war Kansas right, and it stands as a rare Civil War story told from the northern side. A nice contrast to stuff like Errol Flynn's Santa Fe Trail from the same year, which takes the southern view. The Wings of Eagles is a very different kind of John Wayne movie. Directed by John Ford, this one is a biographical drama about real-life naval aviator Frank Weed. You're not getting the usual invincible Wayne hero here. Instead, Wayne plays Weed as a guy who's cocky, dedicated to the Navy, and honestly pretty flawed. When a spinal injury leaves him paralyzed, everything changes. He has to fight to recover, find purpose, and eventually ends up writing screenplays for war movies. This is Ford's tribute to his friend. Real Frank Weed died in 1947, and Ford and Wayne made sure his story wouldn't get lost. The movie opens with some amazing 1920s biplane sequences and real aircraft carrier footage. It even weaves in some genuine naval aviation history and tactics. Ford was a Navy Reserve officer, so he was keen to highlight it all. Still, at its heart, The Wings of Eagles is about resilience, friendship, and what it takes to keep going after life knocks you flat. It's kind of sentimental and old-fashioned, but everyone agreed Wayne's performance had charm and honesty. This one is a World War II submarine movie with Wayne playing Duke Gifford, captain of the USS Thunderfish. A big part of the story revolves around faulty American torpedoes, which would often fail to explode. Wayne's character spends a lot of the film trying to figure out why the weapons keep malfunctioning, and the crew ends up discovering a flaw in the firing pins. This wasn't just made up for the movie. Early in the war, that really happened, and the Navy eventually fixed it. To make sure the details were right, the filmmakers brought in Admiral Charles Lockwood, who oversaw submarines in the Pacific during World War II. He was a technical advisor on set. There's quite a lot of action scenes like depth charge attacks and ramming a Japanese Q-ship. They are surprisingly realistic for the time. The Navy supported the production, even lent real submarines for filming. Not everything works, of course. There's a completely unnecessary romance subplot with Patricia Neal as Wayne's ex-wife, a Navy nurse. Wayne even admitted later that there was too much melodrama. Still, the movie's solid enough. You get authentic Navy detail, a real look at the challenges crews faced, some action, a little romance, and even some humor. Flying Leathernecks is a World War II movie about U.S. Marine Corps pilots fighting at Guadalcanal. John Wayne plays Major Dan Kirby, a tough, old-school commander, and Robert Ryan is his second in command, the guy who's actually a little more human, less by the book. It's got all the classic ingredients. Lots of dogfights, plenty of action, and a pretty standard conflict between a hard-ass commanding officer and the officer who pushes back. You see plenty of real combat photography mixed with those big Hollywood dogfight scenes. The film had full support from the Marine Corps, and a lot of it was shot at real California and Arizona bases. There's no question about the authenticity of the planes. You get F-4U Corsairs and Japanese Zeros right up there on screen. This one was basically an assignment from Howard Hughes, who wanted a straight-up patriotic action movie. This was the last film he produced before bailing out of the movie business, and he made sure the edits were loaded with American flags and flashy combat. But the movie still works if you just want solid war action, even if the dramatic beats are predictable. All in all, it's just a strong, straightforward combat film. Back to Bataan came out right at the end of World War II, built to pump up morale. John Wayne stars as Colonel Joseph Madden, an American who stays behind after the fall of Bataan and helps organize guerrilla fighters. Anthony Quinn plays a Filipino leader. Together, their characters lead the fight until General MacArthur returns, which is the whole Back to Bataan angle. The movie is both war action and tribute. It's not shy about showing real horrors like the Bataan Death March, and it spends a lot of time honoring the Filipino fighters right alongside the Americans. Director Edward Dmytryk mixes in some actual documentary footage of guerrillas and the retaking of the Philippines. For authenticity, the ending even features General Carlos P. Romulo. He was a real Philippine Army officer. Not everybody bought into the Hollywood version. Some American servicemen who fought in the Pacific called the movie fake, too clean compared to what they lived through. One sailor wrote that he was disgusted to discover how John Wayne's war differed from his own. That's not hard to believe. The movie was timely and well-intentioned, but basically it's just a routine shoot 'em up, not adding much. Flying Tigers was John Wayne's first ever World War II movie, and it's the one that turned him into a real screen war hero. The movie came out less than a year after Pearl Harbor, at a moment when people needed to see some kind of American victory. Flying Tigers tells the story of the real American volunteer group. They were U.S. pilots who volunteered to fight for China against Japan, technically before America even entered the war. In the movie, Wayne plays squadron leader Jim Gordon, a character based on the actual commander Claire Chennault. The film is obviously pure propaganda. Wayne and his pilots take on wave after wave of Japanese planes, dogfights all over the skies, heroic sacrifices left and right. In real life, the Flying Tigers didn't actually see combat until right after Pearl Harbor, not before. But that's not the story the movie wanted to tell. Sure, it's naive, almost like a comic book version of war where one group of pilots basically wins the whole thing on their own. But that's exactly why it worked in 1942. People needed heroes, and Flying Tigers delivered. The Longest Day is about as far from comic book war as you can get. Released in 1962, it's a full-scale, almost documentary-style retelling of D-Day. The film is huge. There's 42 international stars and perspectives from Americans, British, French, even Germans. It was a major box office hit and won 2 Oscars, Best Cinematography and Best Special Effects. John Wayne doesn't lead this one, but he's front and center in a key supporting role as Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Vandervoort of the 82nd Airborne, the guy who leads his men through hell with a broken ankle. And there's a really funny story behind his casting. The producer, Darryl Zanuck, wanted every big star he could get. Problem was, a few years earlier, Zanuck had badmouthed big stars trying their hand at producing and directing. Wayne, after the Alamo bombed, was furious. So when Zanuck came calling for The Longest Day, Wayne agreed, but only if Zanuck paid him $250,000. That was at least 10 times more than any other star in the movie. Wayne obviously didn't care about the money. He just wanted Zanuck to pay, literally, for that earlier insult. And Zanuck agreed, so Wayne got his payback and in the process delivered the most expensive cameo of the entire decade. A lot of folks don't know this, but John Wayne was in rough shape making In Harm's Way. He was hiding a serious illness on set, lung cancer, that would send him in for surgery later that year. The movie itself is a big World War II epic, directed by Otto Preminger. Wayne plays Captain Rockwell Torrey, a career Navy officer dealing with both battles and personal messes right after Pearl Harbor. This isn't the usual Wayne propaganda job. The film puts Wayne in a genuinely human, sometimes vulnerable spot. The script here goes to darker places than you'd expect for a 60s war movie. There's a subplot about Kirk Douglas's character assaulting a woman, real fallout from it, and also cynical takes on military bureaucracy. They went all in on authenticity, filmed it all in Hawaii and refit modern ships to look period correct since there weren't any real pre-war ships left. In Harm's Way is long and sometimes heavy-handed, but it lets Wayne do something different. He's part of an ensemble, not just the unstoppable lead. And he gets to play a flawed officer trying to hold everything together. It's a swan song for black and white war epics, and it's the last time you see Wayne in this kind of role. Back in World War II, the U.S. Navy came up with the Seabees, construction battalions that were ready to fight if things got hairy. The Fighting Seabees is a highly fictional take on how those units started. For Republic Pictures, this was their biggest budget project yet, $1.5 million. They still kept it thrifty by recycling stock footage from an earlier Wayne film, Flying Tigers, especially for the battle scenes with enemy planes. The plot flips the usual Wayne formula. Here he starts out as a stubborn civilian who has zero patience for military discipline. He spends most of the movie butting heads with the brass until, true to form, he redeems himself in the big finish. There's a love triangle, because it was the 1940s and you had to have something like that, even if it doesn't add much. Like a lot of World War II movies made during the war, The Fighting Seabees was rushed out as propaganda, meant to boost morale on the home front. But despite all that, The Fighting Seabees is actually watchable, even today. Wayne's bravado is on full display, but the movie doesn't drag. You even get to see the Duke attempt the jitterbug, and he looks as awkward as you'd imagine. At number 2 is John Ford's war masterpiece. This was Ford's third film with Wayne after Stagecoach and The Long Voyage Home, and it was released just 3 months after World War II ended in September 1945. The story follows 2 lieutenants, played by Wayne and Robert Montgomery, who finally get to lead their boat squadrons into battle after Pearl Harbor. Ford wanted authenticity. The Navy supplied real patrol boats, and a lot of the cast and crew had served in the war. Ford himself was actually there at both Midway and Omaha Beach. He knew what actual combat looked like. That did not include Wayne, and Ford never let him forget it. By the time production got underway, the relationship between Ford and Wayne was so tense that Wayne ended up storming off set at one point. Unlike Ford's usual style, the tone here is much more somber. World War II had just ended, and the mood in the country was still heavy. The story isn't about big heroics. It's about desperate American forces after Pearl Harbor, low on supplies, facing defeat, but refusing to quit. The film is a great reminder of just how bad things looked for the Americans in the Pacific right after Pearl Harbor. And at number 1, I've got Sands of Iwo Jima. If you've seen Eastwood's Flags of Our Fathers, you know about the famous flag-raising image. It became a symbol of the Marine Corps. Sands of Iwo Jima takes that moment and builds a whole film around it. They mixed real documentary footage with staged battle scenes that still hold up. John Wayne plays Marine Sergeant John Stryker, a hard-nosed leader whose men can't stand him at first. But as they fight their way across the Pacific, the soldiers start to get it. His training and attitude are what keep them alive. The film's centerpiece is the flag raising at Iwo Jima, recreated on screen with the help of the 3 surviving Marines who are actually there on Mount Suribachi. It landed 4 Oscar nominations: Best Actor for Wayne, Best Writing, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound Recording. Wayne had been in the industry since the 20s but had never gotten this kind of recognition before. He lost Best Actor to Broderick Crawford in All the King's Men. That didn't stop the film from becoming a huge hit, and today it still sits at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, a perfect score that even most classics don't hold.